June 12, 1898, a pharmacy counter in Berlin gleamed with a new bottle labeled heroin, a word that would soon echo through the corridors of medicine, crime, and tragedy. Bayer's glossy advertisement promised a miracle cure for coughs, a non-addictive alternative to morphine, and a tonic that could restore vigor and confidence to anyone who dared to try it. The promise was as intoxicating as the powder inside, and within months the world would discover how seductive safety can be when cloaked in scientific certainty. To understand how a humble cough syrup became the poster child for early 20th century drug optimism, we must first travel back to the late 1800s, when the opioid family was still being cataloged like exotic plants in a botanical garden. Morphine, extracted from opium in the early 1800s, had already earned a reputation for both relief and ruin. Physicians praised its ability to dull the pain of surgery, yet patients whispered about a morbid habit that clung to the drug like a shadow. In 1874, a German chemist named Friedrich Bayer and his partner, the pharmacist Heinrich Dresser, set out to synthesize a substance that could deliver the analgesic punch of morphine without the dreaded dependence. The result was diacetylmorphine, a chemically modified form of morphine that they christened heroin, derived from the German word heroisch, meaning heroic, because of its perceived ability to elevate the human spirit. Bayer's early laboratory notes boasted that the new compound was more potent, more reliable, and crucially, less addictive. The company filed a patent in 1897, and within a year, heroin made its debut not as a narcotic for the underworld, but as a pharmaceutical marvel. Bayer's marketing campaign was nothing short of a masterclass in persuasive science. Advertisements appeared in medical journals, boasting that heroin could suppress the cough reflex without the toxicity of opium, and that it was safe for children and the elderly alike. The product was sold over the counter in pharmacies across Europe and the United States, packaged in elegant glass bottles with a bright red label that promised pure, refined, and reliable. Physicians, eager for a solution to the rampant coughs of tuberculosis patients, began prescribing it liberally, and the public, reassured by the corporate seal, embraced it with gusto. The first warning signs emerged in the form of letters to medical journals in 1901, where a handful of doctors reported cases of patients developing a strange, insatiable craving after just a few doses. Yet these anecdotes were dismissed as individual idiosyncrasies. The prevailing belief was that heroin's acetyl groups prevented the formation of the addictive morphine metabolite. The pharmaceutical narrative held firm: a safe, non-addictive cough medicine for the masses. The turning point arrived in 1911, when the United States Department of Agriculture's Bureau of Chemistry, under the direction of Dr. Charles F. Kettering, initiated a formal investigation into the new narcotic. The study involved administering heroin to a cohort of volunteers who had never used opiates before, observing their physiological responses over several weeks. The results were stark. Within days, subjects reported euphoria, a profound sense of well-being, and a rapid escalation in dosage to recapture the initial high. By the third week, withdrawal symptoms, restlessness, insomnia, tremors, began to surface when the drug was withheld. The researchers concluded that her heroin was as habit-forming as morphine, if not more so. The trial's findings were published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, but the impact was muted. Bayer's legal team threatened libel suits, and the pharmaceutical press rallied to protect the lucrative market. Meanwhile, an unsung hero of medical forensics, Dr. James G. Jimmy O'Malley, a forensic pathologist in New York City, was called to perform an autopsy on a 28-year-old factory worker who had died suddenly after a night of heavy heroin consumption. The autopsy report, sealed for years, painted a chilling picture. The lungs were congested with hemorrhagic fluid, the heart was enlarged and scarred, and the liver bore the telltale signs of acute opioid toxicity. O'Malley's notes describe the silvery powder as a chemical weapon masquerading as medicine, capable of stealing life within hours of exposure. The public revelation of O'Malley's findings coincided with the passage of the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914 in the United States, which imposed strict regulations on the sale of opiates and coca derivatives. Bayer, facing mounting legal pressure, withdrew heroin from the American market, rebranding it for other uses, such as a local anesthetic in dentistry. In Europe, the tide turned slower. The British Medicines Act of 1920 finally classified heroin as a controlled substance, but not before millions had been exposed. In the decades that followed, the legacy of heroin's pharmaceutical infancy became a cautionary tale etched into the annals of medical history. The drug, once celebrated as a hero, re-emerged in the 1920s as a clandestine street narcotic, fueling the first wave of modern heroin addiction in urban centers across the globe. The very laboratories that once touted its safety began researching antagonists and treatment modalities, culminating in the development of methadone maintenance therapy in the mid-20th century. The story of heroin as a cough medicine reminds us that scientific progress is never insulated from the ambitions of commerce, and that the label non-addictive can be as deceptive as any illusion. It underscores the importance of rigorous clinical trials, transparent reporting, and an unflinching willingness to question the narratives presented by those who profit from hope. Subscribe to the Autopsy Files for more stories like this.